Hello, Romantics. I'm Sarah Gomez, author, romance lover, and host. You're listening to Romancing the Story, a podcast centered around writing, reading, and story structure, all with a twist of romance.
We're at episode 88, and on today's episode, I speak with Watty award-winning author Lux Raven about how platforms like Wattpad are influencing publishing, serialized reader habits, and building a reader base. We chat Lux's Wattpad turned self-published novels, Siren's Mark Duology, and its genesis. It's a paranormal romance that follows Ava, a chronically ill human, and Zane, the British tattooed siren, who band together to navigate a world of supernatural intrigue. The story started out as a Wattpad novel, uploaded chapter by chapter over nearly a year, and gained enough traction to amass millions of reads and an award. We discuss and break down the appeal of serialized platforms like Wattpad and elements that helped Lux find readers. With the continued success of fanfiction and original stories finding an audience prior to being published, Lux chatted some keen insights on pros and cons of writing for serialized readers. Honestly, though, the discussion can be applied to any reader, since many attention spans are getting shorter, and readers, including myself, have found themselves scrolling through fanfictions and original works looking for new subgenres or fresh takes. Links to connect to Lux, as well as other media mentioned, will be listed in the episode description. I do use some Amazon affiliate links for books, so if you buy through the link, it helps the podcast and is always appreciated. I've got a little surprise for you. The lovely Heather K. Ling joins in at the end of this episode with a special reading from Siren's Mark. Think of it as a bonus treat. So grab a cup of tea, get comfy, and stick around until the very last minute to enjoy her narration. With that said, let's jump right in.
Welcome, romance author and Wattpad creator, Lux Raven. Yay! So welcome, Lux. I'm very excited to have you.
I'm excited to chat with you.
So in case listeners don't know, can you tell them a little bit about yourself and your writing?
Yeah, so I'm a paranormal romance author, and I basically got my start on Wattpad, which is a mobile serialized kind of fiction platform. And they have like both an app and people also read on the website. So it's kind of, mostly mobile, but some people do read on the website as well. And it's this interesting place for people who are amateur authors all the way to professional authors. And it's just kind of, you can put your work online and see how people relate to it. And I was lucky enough that I got a huge response to my work, and I got, a few million reads on my big series. And it just kind of turned into this great thing. And now I have two of my books, the Siren's Mark series, are now published. And I've kind of built my career from there.
Well, and I love that you have that story, because I know we saw a big influx of that around the 2010s. Like we saw all these like people who were writing on Wattpad and like fan fiction sites and everything like that. And they were starting there, and then they were gravitating to the published area, or self-publishing and or getting publishing deals. So it's not unheard of that a lot of people are doing this.
Yeah, not at all. I mean, I actually joined Wattpad initially because I had heard of the success of After, which is kind of probably the platform's biggest success that turned into a book series as well as a series of movies that were very, very popular. And it was written by Anna Todd, who was a novice author on Wattpad, who was just kind of writing this, at the time, Harry Styles fan fiction that she was just really into. And I was fascinated by that concept. And so right around the time the movies were coming out, I downloaded the platform. I'm like, what is this? Because it kind of baffled me, like, how do you go from, the real person fan fiction, which was something that I knew very little about, to, this huge successful movie series. And I read her work, and it was so fun and so dramatic and over the top and very different from what I had experienced in traditionally published fiction. And I was like, oh, this is fun. This is cool. I want to do this. Like, I immediately got it. I got the appeal. Like, I'm sure there are people who are like, oh, this is not for me. But for me, I was like, no, I get it. I'm in, I'm invested.
I see that quite a bit. And I've kind of said it in other interviews too, because I've interviewed several authors who started out writing fan fiction first.
Mhm.
And it was something that I've kind of seen, and I even see it now. I think one of the most recently popular books that came out earlier of 2025 was, I think it's called Alchemized. And it started out
Oh,
as
yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
like as a Hermione and Draco Malfoy fan fiction is what I
Yep.
read. And most recently, I work in video games, so I know a lot about the Call of Duty like TikTok girlies and out
Yeah.
there, and they love and then that kind of gravitated into romance because now, and I'm seeing it now more in publishers are picking it up as this dark military romance. A lot of things I think that start out writers wanting to read these stories, so they go out and make them, and then that's when publishing
Exactly.
picks it up. So they're kind of in the afterthought, which is kind of interesting to think about that the indies and everyone out there who are writing are the ones actually pioneering and making these things popular.
Yeah, well, I
So
think there's a lot that individuals are willing to take a risk on that big publishing companies are not willing to take that risk on. And so you will see, like, my series, one of the big things I did differently is I have a chronically ill heroine. And it's because that's what I wanted to see. And I think, like, there's a reason that a lot of the marginalized characters start out in places like Wattpad and places like fan fiction, because that's where they don't have to get past this sea of, board of directors approving whether or not, they want to publish this. You just get the people who actually they want it for themselves. And then kind of it becomes this people driven publishing house in a way where they generate the buzz within, and that kind of spreads into, oh, okay, this is popular. And then the publishing houses are more likely to pick up on it and be like, oh, okay, it's already successful. Now it's less of a risk.
and just like you mentioned, you recently released the Sirens Mark duology. Congrats. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, that's always a huge deal when you are able to publish a book, right? Plus two.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
amazing.
and it was a long time coming, and it was something that had been requested by my readers for so long. And it was like, at some point I was just like, I really want to get this out there for them, for the people who have been requesting it for such a long time. And it's a different world, but it's still, it's two sides of the same coin. They're very similar, the kind of mobile to publishing sides.
The duology is a spicy paranormal romance with the dual POV featuring a disabled human heroine, like you were mentioning, with chronic illness,
Mhm.
and a brooding supernatural bad boy. So the duology actually started as a Wattpad serialized story. You kind of mentioned
Mhm.
that. What was it about the story that was important to write?
For me, I was just very sick at the time, and it more or less took up most of 2020 writing it, and I had very much nothing going on. And I was reading a lot of romance. I was reading on Wattpad. I thought this looks really fun, and I was already kind of leaning towards, okay, I'm going to write something. And I was very sick, and I kept reading this stuff going, this doesn't feel familiar to me. People were going out dancing and having, wild adventures and, climbing crazy, walls outside of castles and stuff that I was like, well, that could not happen for me. Like, I'm literally like bedbound. I was, probably the worst I've ever been illness wise. And I just didn't see myself in any of these characters. And it made me kind of sad. And I think when you have that, when you're reading a lot of romance, it's telling you who is the lovable, attractive character. And if you're not seeing yourself in that lovable, attractive character, it has this kind of negative impact on your self-esteem. And I was like, oh, I feel like I'm not as lovable. Like I can't be someone that someone could fall in love with because I can't do any of these things. And I don't feel like a very exciting, attractive person lying here in bed. And for me, I just kept wanting to see it myself. And so I was like, I'm going to write it. I'm going to put someone in there who's like, her story is not about being sick. She just happens to be sick and she's doing a lot of other fun, interesting things and getting involved in this paranormal world. And, she's also taking frequent naps and going to the doctor's appointments and other, boring stuff that kind of made her feel relatable to me and made her feel like a real fleshed out character without her story being about being sick. And I was very lucky that there were just a lot of people out there who wanted that story. And, I think they do always say, like write what you want to read. And I think that was very true in my case, because I wasn't the only one out there who wanted to read it. And you're usually not the only one. If you're thinking, oh man, I wish this book existed, there are other people who would like to read that book too. And for me, it kind of had this life of its own. And I was so honored to be able to do for other people what hadn't been done for me at that point and give them a chronically ill hero that, made them feel seen.
That's kind of what I feel like a lot of people kind of see now, especially now that chronic illness is starting to get diagnosed, I think more
Yes.
specifically. So like people are starting to understand more and more about it. So seeing that now in the mainstream, I think is phenomenal, like a spotlight.
Like I've talked to so many people who have had chronic illnesses, and it's something that we keep very private generally, and especially with women. I don't know if we're, actively taught that or just passively taught that, keep it all inside, don't let everyone know that you're not feeling well. And as someone who is very out and open about my chronic illness and have been even more so since I wrote these books, I get so much feedback from people coming up to me. Oh, actually, I'm chronically ill too. And like people I didn't know in my life were chronically ill. They're like, actually, I'm struggling too. And I'm so glad I can talk about this. And, writing these books has very much opened a door for a lot of people to come to me because now I'm like the chronically ill person that they know. And they're like, oh, I'm struggling too. And there's so much community to be built within this circle of chronic illness. And it's just slowly starting because people are realizing like, oh, other people are experiencing these things too. And I don't have to be alone and I don't have to hide it and I don't have to keep it inside. And in that regard, just, writing these stories and being open about my story has been so great for me because now I see it as like, okay, well, I don't want to deal with this and I don't want to be chronically ill, but considering that I am, there is something that I can bring to the table and do with it. And I can share in this community with other people.
Exactly. And so why did you choose to use Wattpad then as the best place to start writing and posting that story?
Part of it was that I loved the freedom because I have a journalism degree and I was kind of, brought into writing through journalism. And, there's a lot of rules when you are taught how to write professionally in college. And Wattpad had no rules. It was just, write what you love, write what you write. And I was incredibly inspired by Anna Todd because she was an amateur and she wrote this amazingly compelling story, the After series. And it was like every time I turned a page, thinking like, okay, now this is going to be the lull in between when all the action happens. It was just more action. It was just like, it was packed page to page. Like every time you thought like, okay, that's over. Now now something's going to like relax. No, more action. And like she would have, one of the things I loved is that she would have characters just show up out of nowhere because she wanted them in the scene. And And the first couple times it happened, I was like, what, where'd they come from? They're just here now. They just showed up like at the dorm room. Why are they here? And by the time I finished reading it, I was like, actually, that's great. I love that because sometimes you don't want to read about how they got to the dorm and why they're in the situation. Like you just want to go straight to the action. Just tell me the exciting bits, skip over the parts they don't care about. And, to some extent, a lot of us as readers will do that where we're like, yeah, I don't really care about that part. Let's get to the good stuff. And it was very freeing and fun. And I just thought, like, this is the kind of writing that if I'm going to try my hand at writing a book, that's what I want to be doing. I want to be doing this free form, uninhibited form of writing. And Wattpad was the place where that was happening. And in my mind, it was very much a like pipe dream kind of thing that I'm going to put it out there and no one's going to read it. That was my genuine thought. Is it was like, nobody's going to read it. Maybe my husband will read it. Like other than that, I'm not going to get reads. I knew going in, like a lot of people work very, very hard to get readership on Wattpad and it doesn't always work out for them. And it's tough, especially to get those, initial reads. And I just I knew going in, I'm like, no, I'm not going to get any readers. I was ready for that. I was prepared for that. And I actually got plenty of readers and it kept growing. And it was pretty much constantly a surprise to me that I kept gaining more following and kept getting more interest. And I was like, really? Like people are still reading this. And it definitely makes it more high pressure in that experience of like, oh, now people are paying attention. Now I need to make sure I'm really doing a good job. But I always set out to have this book be for no audience at all. And it was just like, I'm writing it for me. I'm going to do the things. I'm going to post regularly, like everyone says to do. I'm going to assume that the whole world is watching, but I'm also going to assume that no one is going to see this at all.
That is such a great method, though. I've always heard that is like write for yourself first and foremost as your own reader. So that is, I think, a phenomenal like takeaway for that. Like if you're writing something out there, it may or may not get seen, but write for yourself, right?
Yeah, and I've talked to a lot of people about Wattpad, and they're like, "Oh, I'm getting discouraged because nobody's reading it." And I've kind of said, like, as great as the audience feedback is, as valuable as that is, you have to assume you're not going to get any. And I didn't get any for a long time. I mean, that book was at the time when I published it around 71 chapters. And I think I didn't start getting readers until like chapter 40 or something like that. And then people started kind of like trickling in, and I was posting every single week, twice a week. And for a while it was just nobody. And I knew that. I accepted that. And if you get that mindset of like, listen, it's going to be nobody for a while, that helps you push through that feeling of, oh, I'm just speaking, into the void and nobody's hearing me. And that frustration of like, okay, maybe people don't like it. Maybe I should stop writing. Just, you got to get past that. You got to get through that instinct of, I need that feedback to keep going, because that will doom you. And that's what dooms a lot of writers on platforms like Wattpad, is they will see that lack of readership and they will get discouraged and they'll go, nobody's reading, nobody cares. I'm not getting any comments or I'm not getting any reads. And that means it's not worth reading. It's not worth writing. That's not the message to take away. The message to take away is that people take a long time to get to your story, to find your story, to have the time to sit down and read it. And a lot of people just inherently distrust unfinished stories. So you have to keep going. You have to finish it, because literally the day I finished my story and marked it complete, I got, I think, the same amount of reads the next day as I had gotten in the previous like several months of posting, because people want to know that you are reliable. They want to know that like, okay, this is going to be finished, because unfortunately, a lot of writers on Wattpad do get discouraged and they don't finish and they abandon their projects. And so when you get into something and you really like it, only to get to the, chapter 45, the climactic chapter, and it just stops, people have been burned. They don't want that experience again. And so they want to know that it's going to be finished.
That's totally fair because that was something I was going to ask you about, like when you started getting that readership. But that's fantastic too because a lot of people will get discouraged. I see them now, even in the self-publishing
Mhm.
area. I see a lot of authors give up like a couple of books in because they're like nobody's reading them. But all it takes, like you said, is just that right person, and then or that right platform sometimes,
Mhm.
and then that will boost you into the right area for your readers. I know you said like it kind of went viral, right? You kind of amassed more readers when you hit that complete button as opposed to when the
Yeah,
author read writing.
it was pretty quick to see that like immediate, like I don't remember the exact numbers, but I had like a few thousand reads by the time I had finished.
Hmm.
And that was about another few thousand the next day after I hit complete. And it was like, oh, wow, this is something.
Right.
But it like kind of trickled off a little bit. It was like, okay, people who were waiting for it to be finished, they saw that it was finished, they read it, and it kind of like died down. And I was getting like 100 reads a day, something like that, which is very good, but you know, um, nothing like shocking to me. And I just kept at it, and I kept like talking to my readers, and I had a second book in the works that I said I was going to be starting on, and I just kind of kept engaging with the community and kept doing my thing, sort of thing. And I was also really considerate about the hashtags I was using on platforms like Wattpad. Hashtags can be really gold, and you want to change them. And kind of you want both the frequent updates and the considered updates, meaning that you look at what's actually performing and you make changes accordingly. And that was something I was doing as well. About every week, I'd kind of go in and I kind of like mess with the hashtags and like, okay, these ones are performing well, so I'll keep an eye out for that. Around like 3 weeks after I had completed it, I ended up trending in I think it was like love or something. It was one of the big hashtags. It was either romance or love or something like that. And you just gotta be ready to ride that wave. Like because I was lucky that I was in a state where I was like real able to engage with people and to, immediately dive in when things were going well and be like, yeah, and I'm starting the sequel right now and you can come over here. And I was really able to kind of build off of that momentum. And it was like 10,000 reads that day and then 10,000 reads the next day. And there was, I think, probably around a whole week there that it was 10,000 reads every day. And I was just like, this is just barreling forward. And all the preparation that I did with this book of kind of, like I said, I assume everyone's going to read it and no one's going to read it at the same time, but I really wanted to put out a quality book. I was, cautious about editing. I did my research. I, put in, the best possible description, the best possible cover, and the best possible hashtags. And so when it happened and I was able to reach the people that I wanted to reach and the readers that I wanted, the whole product was ready to go. It was a very complete quality product that I was not like, oh no, I'm not ready. Don't look at me. I was like, okay, yeah, this is good and ready to go. And you can look at it. And then I can just kind of, sit back and engage with people. And when they comment, I can, respond and have this interaction. But I knew that the product was good at that point.
Right. Well, and when you were writing it, or as you were writing it, did you structure your chapters or your episodes to keep readers hooked or obsessed over your writing? Because the reason I say that is I know that Amazon Vella, which is
Mhm.
no longer around, but I
Yeah.
remember people telling me I did an interview for that, and the author had told me that a lot of people were making short and snappy. So because of that, is
Mhm.
that something you did?
So it wasn't necessarily something that I explicitly set out to do, but it was something that I had enjoyed in other Wattpad stories and was kind of, you know, channeling in a sense.
Hmm.
Because I do think that there is a particular genre might be the wrong word, but style of writing that exists explicitly in the mobile serial world,
Mhm.
where they do tend to be faster paced chapters. There's not a lot of fluff is the wrong word because in fan fiction, fluff means a little more like cozy moments, and they do that. But there's not a lot of filler.
Mm.
there's not a lot of, in between moments that are unnecessary. You're getting to the meat of the story. It's very plot dense, very drama heavy, and you get in right away. And I liked that. And so I wanted to do that. And I also very much saw it as like as if I were writing a TV show. I think a lot of, long form traditionally published books, they write more like a movie. It's, they're kind of separated by chapters, which are kind of these little acts. And with mobile fiction, with serial fiction, you get more of these episodic structures for your plot, where it's like you have the overarching plot and then you have the micro plots that occur in each chapter. And you want to kind of have the beginning and resolution of these micro plots inside these episodes while continuing the greater story. And for me, I pretty early on was like, okay, well, how do I want to structure these? Because they're going to be like every couple days, they're going to be getting a new one. And so they're not necessarily, going to remember what happened in the last one. And how do I fit these together in a way that makes sense? And for me, the way I decided to do that was to kind of do like, this is definitely going to date me, but there's a lot of TV shows, especially like in the 90s and early 2000s, where they would have next week on this TV show, and then they would show these clips, and sometimes they would even have the narrator kind of describe what's going to happen next week. And I kind of took that inspiration, and I figured somehow in every chapter, I'm going to introduce the next, conceit, the next, small micro plot line that's going to be in the next chapter. There's one scene where the girl, the heroine, she faints at the end of the chapter. And so it's like the next chapter is going to be dealing with her at the hospital and the repercussions of her fainting. But so it introduces the new drama, and you're immediately like, oh, what happens there? What's the new drama? And certainly it sometimes falls into the realm of cliffhanger, but it also is kind of this constant movement forward of like, oh, this is the next thing that's going to happen. If you're interested, the stay tuned moment where it's like, this is the next thing you're going to see. And so that made for this very like bingeable moment. And I had so many readers telling me, they're like, I was just going to get to the end of this chapter and I was going to call it, but then you said this at the last second. Now I have to read the next chapter. And like, if you have that kind of staggered plot line where you do introduce a little bit at the tail end of the first one, it just makes you keep reading, keep pushing through to the next bit because you want to see how it's going to end.
Well, and I really appreciate that you integrated what would naturally work for that character too. If she
Yeah.
faints because she's been feeling not so well and she's dealing with a chronic illness she may or may not know about, that perfectly lines up with like what her character's dealing with.
Yeah.
So,
And I think initially I kind of set out like, okay, well, I'm not going to care too much about the details. I'm not going to care how it all weaves together. I'm just going to write something really, kind of straight what I want to write from the heart, see where it goes. And I found that a lot of times those things would actually naturally weave into the plot. And you'd be like, oh, I actually, with one sentence, I can explain how I get from here to here. And I don't have to lose that connectivity between plot points. I can just make it brief and, build enough that people understand when these things happen, why they're happening, without necessarily having to devote a lot of time to it.
right. Yes, because that's what I noticed while reading, because I've read the first book. So while I was reading it, I noticed that it did kind of weave, it naturally kind of brought everything together. Like everything kept going together really well, even with the next situation that might happen. So, like to me as a reader, that I appreciate that. I know Anna Todd did a great job with like breaking the system kind of, right?
Yeah.
But I think as readers, we are reading so much now that because you're just inundated with so many, I think, stories
Mhm.
that I think it gets specific to where we can kind of see it as a whole and be like, oh, I really enjoy it. It's not vignettes, but it's a whole book that kind of
Yeah.
flows together.
And I was very kind of pleased with how that naturally unfolded because
Mhm.
I wanted to kind of let go and have that experience of the Anna Todd style, that strategy of just going in bold and going for, writing the scenes you want to read and those scenes you want to write. And I was lucky that I was able to find a lot of ways to weave it together. And because I did a lot of notes super early on when I was planning the book, I saw a lot of these connections early, and I was like, I can actually make this make sense. And I don't even have to try super hard. This can make sense, and I don't have to put in that filler either.
So were there other techniques that you utilize to help write mobile first and for a serialized platform specifically?
Yeah, so certainly when it comes to formatting, it's a big question and something to be aware of when you're writing for mobile, because people who are reading on their phones, they need shorter paragraphs and they need shorter chapters in general. So um, my kind of sweet spot I found is 1,200 to max of 3,000 words per chapter.
Mm.
And that's where I'm kind of like, that's where I always try to aim. And every once in a while, I do go over for a really long chapter, but you also don't want to go too short, especially if you're dealing with platforms like Wattpad. A lot of these platforms have ads between chapters. So you want to be aware of not going too short, because then they're just going to be inundated with ads every 5 seconds and they're going to bail. You don't want that either.
Mm.
But if you have it too long, they don't have a good stopping point. And a lot of mobile readers are reading on the go. They're reading in between things. So you want them to be able to, read this chapter on the train and then, oh, here's my stop. I'll get off and I can pick up on the next chapter, when I get on the bus. You want that flexibility where the chapters are very well contained and they're neither too long nor too short. Oh, I was going to say also the paragraphs are another thing to just be wary of. Basically, if you're looking at it on mobile and your paragraph takes up the entire screen, it's too long. You shorten it. It's just your brain needs those little breaks. It needs to see those little visual breaks to help keep track of these big blocks of text on a screen. And inherently, if you're looking at text on an e-reader, you're seeing this, wide panel of text, but on a phone, that wide panel becomes just a huge sheet on vertical. And so you need to be aware of that and look at your own book and see when it's getting too big. Because if you look in mobile, and a lot of people don't do this, they publish it and then they don't go and they look at it. You got to go look at it, because every once in a while I'll see something that I'm like, oh, this looks crazy on mobile. This did something really weird. And they're usually easy fixes. It's usually just like, okay, enter, make that a new paragraph, solved. But it's really important to physically see it and see when it's starting to strain your eyes looking at it.
Well, and I never thought about that, but you're right. If I see like a wall of text when I open my phone, I'm intimidated and I'm just like, nope.
Exactly, especially because the more complex paragraphs are the longer ones, the ones where they're being more flowery and getting into more detail. Those tend to be the ones that take up the most space.
Mm-hmm.
And those are exactly the kinds of things that are not easy to read when you're, on the go, when you're doing something else. You want these quick breaks for your mind to step from chapter to chapter, from paragraph to paragraph. You want to be able to see where those breaks are and really naturally come back to them. And if you are writing on the train and you look up because something happened, or is this my stop, or whatever's going on, you want to be able to look back down and know exactly where you were. And if there's not these visual cues, you will immediately lose your place and get frustrated and be like, oh, this is too much for me right now. I'm going to do this later. And then maybe never come back to it.
Yeah, that's totally fair, because I will absolutely do that just out of pure frustration is DNF
Yeah.
a read, and not meaning to. I think sometimes there's just so much we just kind of move on. So
Yeah.
those are fantastic tips. And obviously it resonated with readers, your story, Siren's Mark in particular. So as you were writing it, and even after you completed it, I know you put hashtags in, but did you market anywhere else? Did you go on social media? Did you post in any groups, or did you kind of put it out there?
So I did the Wattpad forums existed at the time. They no longer exist, but I found that wasn't particularly useful. It didn't have a lot of return. I did also do Instagram, and I had a little bit of following there. mostly people who had kind of already read the books and they were kind of already interested. But for me, the big way that I found return and I found kind of those early invested readers was actually in reading other books and engaging with other books. And that was something that I did naturally because I was enjoying myself and I'm an avid reader and I read a lot in my genre of paranormal romance. So for me, that was something I was just already going to do. And when other authors were writing good stuff, I wanted to be the fan for them that I would love for myself. I was always super engaging and I was like, yeah, like, oh, I love this and oh, I hate this character and I want to punch them. And, like you naturally interact the way you would if you were talking with your friends about a book you're really into. And I was just doing what I was doing naturally. I was commenting and like sometimes I just make dumb jokes because that's who I am. And I make dumb puns and things. And I'd throw in a joke here and there. And people would find these jokes and they would go to my profile and they would start reading my book. And to me, that was wild because I didn't think I was doing marketing. I was engaging in a very genuine way with other people's content. I was enthusiastic about other people's content. One of the big things that I did was I was constantly recommending good books that I was finding. So you can, curate your own lists on the platform, but also off platform, when I was in social media, I was like, oh, if you read Wattpad, you should check out this book. This is really good. And not my own stuff. It was all just, other artists that I was finding and I was appreciating. And people love that. They get when you're being genuine. They respond really well to that. And, if they see my dumb jokes in the comments and they're like, I love this person's dumb jokes, I'm going to go read her books. And it seems like such a silly thing, but I would find time and time again, people would go like, I just added your book to my list because of this joke or because of this funny thing you said. And I'm just like, cool, great. I'm like, that's awesome. And then people started finding me in the comments of other people's books and they're like, oh, I just read your book. It's really great. And that marketing is gold because you're around and other people are coming up saying, I love you and you do great stuff and I like your book. And then people are going, oh, whose book is this? What, tell me more about this sort of thing. And building that community through those genuine interactions was by and large the best thing I did for promotion. And it wasn't even like, it wasn't a promotional game. It does have to come from a genuine place where, you are an engaged reader and you are enthusiastic about what you're seeing. But when it does come from that genuine place, people respond really well.
Yes, I would absolutely agree because yes, the word of mouth I think is the most powerful marketing tool we have. And if they do find it through, like you said, your comments and things, it's like that's your people, right? They get it.
Exactly. And I think if you're reading in your genre, if you're engaging with the community in your genre, you are going to find your people a lot better. And for me, I have always had a lot better luck finding one of the right person than 100 of the wrong people hearing my message. Because, if I'm like, oh, hey, everybody read my book and I'm reaching 100 or 1,000 people who are just totally not my audience, that doesn't do me any good, even if the algorithm thinks it's great. Versus if I, engage with one person who is like, oh, I find your dumb jokes really funny and I'm going to go read your book and then I'm going to go tell everyone how great it is. That person is worth their weight in gold. That's fantastic. And I have such an extraordinary community of fans. My fans are really engaged. They are evangelists for me. They are so enthusiastic. And I'm like, every time I post, I'm like, by the way, thank you. You guys are amazing because they are really amazing. And like, I have very much found this great group of readers who will support me and they will go and tell their friends. And I will get like tagged on Instagram or TikTok or Threads, like, oh, go read her book. She's fantastic. And I'm just like, thank you. That's fantastic. And that's, marketing that I could not pay for. And it's just because I have engaged with these people really genuinely. And when they've commented on my book, then it's like, oh, well, like I respond to them like I would a friend. If my friend's like, oh my God, I hate this character so much. I'm like, yeah, you're supposed to hate him. He's the worst. I have this genuine engagement with them. Or like, sometimes they'll be like, oh, like I really don't like them. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe they'll grow on you. Like, like, but I very much don't take it personally. I think anytime they dislike or like a character or whatever, that's good feedback. That's good information. And I never kind of develop this adversarial relationship with my readers. It's just like, it's a collaboration. It's like, okay, you don't get it. Let's talk about it. Let's figure out where you think it's gone wrong or what I've said that makes this confusing. And when you engage in that way, people are so great and they're so ready to help you and they're so ready to be a part of your art and like, oh, I would love to tell you my thoughts on this and I would love to, see that play out. And I just value it so much, that community and that kind of interaction with them.
Yeah, and I love that you were able to get that feedback a lot of times in real time, right?
Yeah.
Because as you were writing it, did you ever take that feedback into consideration and their
I
reactions?
would say almost every bit of feedback I took in some way.
Mhm.
But like, you're not always gonna like, not everyone's gonna be happy. There are gonna be people who simultaneously go, "Oh, I hate that they did this, and I love that they did this," and you're gonna go, which, which is the right answer." But when it came to things like, comprehension and understanding and following the plot, those notes I feel like are so valid and so useful. If they can tell you, I'm not getting it, something's not adding up, that's something that I can't see for myself. And so when they are pointing out, oh, there's an inconsistency, or even sometimes it feels like an inconsistency because you haven't explained this or you haven't quite, gotten there with the reader, it's like, okay, that's great. I can make a change. I can throw in an explainer line. I can do something with it. And then there's also times when the readers will give you, the feedback that is exactly what you're looking for. If they're like, oh, I'm really suspicious of this guy. And it's like, great. That's who you're supposed to be suspicious of. That's what I wanted you to think, like I'm on the right track. Or other times they'll be like, I think they're innocent and, everything's totally fine. You're like, oh, I was hoping to mislead you a little more. Like, what can I do to, be a little bit trickier here? But like, so much of the feedback is valuable if you can find the value in it, even if it's not like, if someone's like, oh, I don't like that this character made this choice. That's not necessarily saying, okay, the only option to fix that is to make the character make a different choice. Sometimes the option is, maybe I need to explain more why this character is making this choice. Maybe if I gave it that context, they would see it and it would make more sense. Or, maybe I lean into it. Maybe I make them seem like a jerk at first, and then I reveal that, like, oh, actually, there's context here that you didn't understand, and now you relate to the character a little bit better. But like, there's usually like a scrap of useful knowledge, even in something you're like, I'm not going to change that. There's something in that critique that you can be like, okay, I can take that into my next part of the process and figure out how I can use this in some way.
Yeah, I love that there's feedback that you don't necessarily always have to take, but it is valuable in its own right. And also you're using like beta readers. You're
Yeah.
using it as beta readers.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
there was one comment in particular. I was using the word chitin, which it's, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. But it's basically, depending on the mythology, it's either a type of demon or something like a jinn, or just the word for demon in, I can't remember the language, but it's in another language.
Mm.
And the stuff I had read was all like, oh, this is another word for jinn. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to use this. I'm going to use this and work this into the mythology. And one of my readers is like, oh, actually, that is the plural form. And if you want the singular form, I think it's shaitan. I could have this backwards. It's been a while since I've written this particular one, but um, they spoke this language and they were like, yeah, actually, that's plural versus singular. And I was like, this is fantastic information. Like, this is information I did not find elsewhere when I was doing my research. And someone who just speaks this language was coming in like, oh, here's how you actually say it. And and they also explained to me that like, it's their generic word for demon. And it doesn't necessarily mean jinn. And I kind of like used it as like a loosely jinn type character. But they were like, yeah, it basically just in our language, just general demons. We call them all that. I was like, this is such good information. And I'm constantly getting that kind of feedback where it's just like random little tidbits of like, oh, like my mom took this medication and it had this weird side effect. And like people are like chiming in with all sorts of things. I mean, one person literally chimed in with the diagnosis to the illness that I did not know I had when I wrote it.
Really?
Yeah. So, many years later, by the time I had gotten this comment, I did know I was diagnosed with POTS, which is postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. And at the time, did not know what I had. Just was dealing with a lot of symptoms, and I incorporated a lot of those symptoms into Ava's experience. Ava being the lead character in Siren's Mark, and someone just commented, several years after I had written it, and since I had gotten the diagnosis, and they said, "She has POTS. That's what this is." And I just was like, yeah, like I didn't know it when I wrote it. I ultimately did like eventually give her a diagnosis that was different than my own, but I didn't have a diagnosis when I wrote it at the time. So I was just trying to like kind of give her something I couldn't have. But it was kind of shocking to me that a commenter was like, "This is what she has." And I'm just like, you know what? Yep. Like
Absolutely.
that like the group mind that you have access to when you have these devoted readers is just invaluable.
Yeah, community is such a big piece of it. Sometimes I think as authors or readers or writers that we're too close to it and we don't see the bigger picture of the community at large, and that could help
Yeah,
us. So, I mean, I
that's
love
very
that.
true.
Yes, I love that. I love that they were able to give you a diagnosis of all things. I thought they were a doctor. Maybe they were in medical field. Who knows? That's
I
wild.
think
I love it.
the woman who posted actually also had POTS, and it was like she
Ah,
recognized her symptoms. And I was like, you know what? I could have used this like 5 years ago. Like, that would have been really helpful. But you are totally right. You're
right. She's
100%
like, I
correct.
found community here. But that's wow. So this has been a little bit since you've written, right? Siren's Mark. So you wrote it 5 years
Yeah.
ago?
So I mean, I wrote them kind of like the first book I wrote through 2020, and the second book between 2020 and 2021,
Okay.
and they were they went through Wattpad's paid program, which is basically like you can buy coins or you can have a membership and you pay to read certain like higher level cultivated kind of curated books. And they basically brought me this offer of like, do you want to be in our program? And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. That sounds like an awesome next step. And I was working on some other books at that time. And they were like, yeah, you just, move these into the program. And it was around the same time I also won a Watty award for the sequel, Siren's Fall. And they were like, yeah, we want them in the program. And they also like signed me on as a Wattpad star, which was like, I was like, oh, very exciting. I'm a star now. But it was all a really interesting, great experience. And my readers were so fantastic. They were immediately like in the comments when it would like lock at a certain point, you'd have to pay to unlock the chapters. And my readers would go unlock it right now. It's good. It's worth it. You got to do it. And they were very much like cheering on people in the comments, like, oh, should I buy it? And they're like, yes, you should buy it. And I was like, I don't have to do anything. They're marketing me for me. That's excellent. So I did that for quite a while, well over a year. And they had another program where they were also paying me to write the sequel or kind of spin-off of this series and to keep everything exclusive on platform. So I did that for a while. And then I initially got a publishing deal and was going to go the kind of traditional route. And pretty much like a week before we were going to like announce the deal, it fell apart. The company downsized dramatically and they dropped a bunch of their contracts. And I was pretty heartbroken over that. It was the next big step. And ultimately I had kind of this fork in the road where it was like, do I continue on and look for another traditional publishing deal, or do I publish this myself? And I was just kind of so burned by the experience that I was like, all right, I'm going to publish this myself. and I will put it out there, and that way I know it will get out for the fans, because I kept telling them, like, it's coming, it's coming. I promise it's going to happen. And I was just like, I do not want to be the person who says, this is happening for 5 years. Like, I'm going to find a way to get it out there, and I'm going to do it myself. And so that was kind of the turn for me. And I'm like, okay, I'll take this off Wattpad, and I will, publish myself. And then the people who have been asking for a long time, I want this in physical form, they will have that, and I will no longer kind of have to be putting them off.
There you go. Just like people are pioneering on Wattpad, you're like, okay, I'm just going to keep pioneering here in self-publishing. And did anything, I was curious because I didn't get to read the original story when it was on Wattpad. Did anything change, like the way you wrote it, or did you edit things, like certain things?
So I certainly edited. There were a lot of things that my readers caught, that they were just like the best editors in the world, because I went through edits. I had my husband edit it. I went through like so many rounds. and then and then my readers would just catch things, and I'd be like, how did I miss that in like 8 rounds of edits? Like, how did I not see that? And one of the big ones that someone caught is, they said, at the start of this scene they were at his apartment, at the end of the scene they're at her apartment. And I'm just like, oh my God, how did I do that? But so I made a lot of like edits and consistency edits based on just this incredible crowd I had able to beta read. But I also made several changes to kind of like how much of a jerk or lack of the male lead came off as, because in some of the early writings, like I had it in my head, like his motivations and what he was actually thinking, but it wasn't necessarily coming out in the text what was going on in his head and kind of where he was at emotionally. And so sometimes he just seemed like a total jerk, and it was not my intention. And then people were like, yeah, he seems like a jerk. And I'm like, you're right, he does seem like a jerk. I'm going to fix that. And so for this version, I very much like went in and kind of softened some of those edges for him, and like made him a little more understandable as a character, where he was coming from. And I was tempted to change more of like the kind of mobile serial format, where the chapters are a bit shorter, and they have kind of this introduction to the next chapter at the end of the prior chapter. And I ultimately decided not to change that, because even though I do think that that kind of makes it a little more obviously not traditional, and like when you're reading the physical copy, it's a little more like, oh, this is a little bit of a different structure, a little bit of a different format than I'm used to. I still think that that was in part what people did like about the story, and what made it so bingeable. And I really like reading books like that on Wattpad, and it's something that I find very enjoyable. And I'm like, you know what? They want the book in physical form, but that's part of the book that they loved, and that's something that I'm ultimately going to keep.
I'm so glad that you decided to self-publish. So now we have it out in the world, edited and in a beautiful format. So where can listeners find your books, and how can they connect with you?
So the books I think are available pretty much everywhere. It's Siren's Mark and Siren's Fall, but if you look up Siren's Mark, you will find both of them. They're in the Siren's Mark duology, and they're on Amazon. They're on Bookstore, or Bookshop, and pretty much everywhere books are sold. It's a pretty wide. They're on Barnes and Noble. They're just about everywhere you buy your books, you can probably find them. And you can also go to my website, which is luxravenwrites.com. And Lux Raven Writes is also my handle for Instagram, TikTok, Threads. All on there is Lux Raven Writes. And then Wattpad, I am just Lux Raven.
Thanks so much to Lux for joining the show. Finally, I'm also joined by the wonderful Heather K. Ling, a talented narrator who brings stories to life with her voice. She's sharing a short reading from Siren's Mark by Lux Raven, and I think you'll love the way she captures the magic. Let's give it a listen.
If I have to fill out this stupid form one more time, I'm going to lose it. If I didn't have diabetes last week, I don't have it this week. Name, birth date, social security number, new/returning patient. Really? Feels like deja vu. A frustrated sigh escapes me as I write them in. Again. Heart condition, asthma, lung disease. Certainly not since I filled this out on Thursday. I take my pencil and just draw a line down the no column, then flip the page. Name and birth date. Again? I'm struggling to resist the urge to be sarcastic here. What happens if I put a different name on the second page? I think for a moment before I settle on writing, "Stop asking me." Not why I'm calling. I hear a man's voice say in a British accent. Her room number is 207, but I'm not sure what to do from here. What do we have to say at a hospital here? He's tall and almost offensively good-looking, with shaggy brown hair and a thin layer of neatly trimmed facial hair. He's wearing a thin gray t-shirt that clings to his skin with a shoulder tattoo peeking out on one side and another tattoo on his opposite forearm. I watch as he paces across the lobby with a phone to his ear, clearly uncomfortable and speaking in a hushed voice with his back turned to the receptionist. Like, do I have to tell them I'm family or some shit? He asks into his phone. Oh, he's visiting someone. He's probably worried about being let in. I mean, I can't exactly provide proof of that. He continues. I should help him. I go over to him, reaching to tap him on the shoulder, but he turns around before I do. That was weird. He must have heard me coming. He looks quite surprised by my intrusion, but smiles. You don't need to be family, I say. And I wouldn't bother talking to the receptionist anyway. She's legitimately the worst. Fucking Janine. I swear that lady hates me. I point to a cluster of signs and say, just follow the arrows to B campus, and then the numbers leading up to your friend's room. That whole family thing is more of a bad TV medical drama rule, and not actually an issue these days. Besides, if you act like you have permission to be there, you could probably start a fire and no one would question it.
Special thanks to Heather K. Ling for letting us borrow her talents. If you'd like to hear more from her, please be sure to follow her at Heather K. Ling.
As always, stay safe, be well, and keep writing. Bye!